Hello, and welcome to another edition of Heavy Hands. I am your host, Connor Rebush. With me, as always, is Phil McKenzie.
Afternoon.
And I'm sick, Phil, which means none of your goddamn antics. All right?
Mm-hmm. They're not going to be tolerated, are they?
No.
No shenanigans, no tomfoolery.
No tomfoolery whatsoever. You're on a short leash this week, my friend.
I will stay as disciplined and professional as possible as we talk about Yuri Prochaska, Alex Pereira, and the other beefy boys, and also Mackenzie Dern, Jessica Andrade. It's all going to be straight down the line. Technical analysis from this point on.
Be as professional as a professional fighter, you know? Just stick to the plan, right? It was Beef Boys, Phil. The Beef Boys did it. They delivered. I kind of nailed a lot of this card, actually, shockingly.
Spiriting, isn't it?
Yeah. It's disconcerting. I think we both nailed the top two fights, which, hey, kudos. We were wrong, but delightfully so, about Jessica Andrade. I should probably say what we're talking about, just as if, you aren't the same 50 people who listened to the show last week. It's UFC 295, of course, and we had two. Were they both real titles? One was a fake title. One was real.
One
right?
of them is a real title that feels fake, and the other one is a fake title that feels real.
Okay, yeah.
Tom Aspinall's is nominally the fake one, but you actually feel like he's won the heavyweight belt because the other one is essentially being deleted. Whereas Alex Pereira actually did win the real, quote-unquote, real light heavyweight belt, but his one doesn't feel real because everyone has just dropped that thing so many times that we're just in one of those situations where it's going to have to be a few fights before it feels like it's a real belt again.
Everyone dropped it, including the other guy who was fighting for it this weekend.
Uh-huh. So yeah, I mean, at least he is the lineal... No, he's not even the lineal light heavyweight champion. It's still just John Jones, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, well, whatever then.
Not lineal. Anyway, it was Alex Pereira versus Yuri Prochaska for the light heavyweight title, the real one, or so they say. And then it was Tom Aspinall versus Sergey Pavlovich for the interim heavyweight title, or so they say. And really, this was an exceedingly violent card.
It really was. It's just like 5 knockouts.
Everyone was just getting absolutely fucking crushed, which I suppose is what you want for a heavyweight, light heavyweight kind of card. Like, the alternative we know is sheer misery. So I'll take it, and I did take it, and I liked it.
Yep.
And we nailed it.
I don't know how many of these guys are capable of putting on boring fights against each other. If
certainly not
Pavlovich had gone to 5 rounds, they might have gotten awful tired. In fact, if it had gone to 5 rounds, it probably just would have ended up with Aspinall sitting on top of Pavlovich somehow.
Yeah.
But Pereira, Prochaska, I don't think those guys can have boring fights.
I don't think so. Yeah.
I don't think Prochaska can have boring fights unless he's against Cole Conrad. That's the only person, someone along those lines, just a huge, incredibly conservative top position grappler.
Interesting pull, Cole Conrad.
Mm-hmm. The lost heavyweight. Could have been from yesteryear.
Yeah, the polar bear, right? Wasn't that his nickname?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, very exciting card. We were absolutely correct with our main predictions, and let's talk about it. Alex Pereira, Yuri Prochaska. I got to give you extra credit because I talked about. I think I pretty much got this fight. I was pleased to say, go with your gut. That's going to be my new rule. And, I talked about directionality, and I think it was very clear that, certainly at least, that Pereira was a lot less bad going backwards than Prochaska. But
Yes,
mainly
100%.
I talked about how whatever kind of fight Prochaska had, he's just too much of a mess for me to imagine that he would not just get booped by a devastating Alex Pereira shot at some point. And that is precisely how the fight ended. But you, in addition to that, really specifically pointed out a weakness to low kicks, which was such a factor that it almost feels obvious now in retrospect, but it wasn't obvious to me at the time. Like, maybe it should have been. Pereira's become a big low kicker in the UFC. It's become one of his kickboxing weapons, which he did before, but it wasn't such a big part of his game. It's like now he's discovered, wait, these guys absolutely suck at checking low kicks. I can just land these for free.
Even against Adesanya. And to be honest, like Jan Blachowicz, like good kick defenders as you are likely to find, basically.
True. He's been effective with them against everyone, yeah. I think there's an interesting conversation to be had here about how the kickboxing skill set changes in the context of MMA, for better and for worse. Mm-hmm. But you specifically pointed out that Prochaska just doesn't deal with low kicks well. And boy, were you right.
Yeah, it literally just came to me as we were like recording the episode as well. It wasn't anything I'd like figured out through watching tape and so on in the run-up to him. Suddenly I was just like, oh shit, he's going to kick the shit out of his legs, isn't he?
Yeah, he's
like,
going to stand
just
in
the
that
huge wide stance,
mm-hmm.
the way he goes to it more. He's like Pereira's been going to it more and more. Like suddenly it was just like, oh, of course, he's just going to boot him.
He's just
crush his also calf. In our mutual like jacking each other off session, I have to say, like, I wasn't necessarily so sure when you were like saying how Pereira is so much less committed to pressure now, and that he might let himself be forced backwards.
Yeah.
Like, again, you were 100% true. Like, that was 100% correct. I was like, surely he must know he should be forcing this guy back. Because, yeah, this fight was way... Given how it looked in the first, like, minute or two
mm-hmm.
of, when Pereira started landing low kicks and Prochaska was just essentially spinning around, looking like he'd just been, like, shot in the ankle.
I think literally the first or second calf kick Pereira landed, it ripped Prochaska's leg out from under him. Like, the mm-hmm. man's power is really absurd. But yeah, given how it started.
Given that, this was a far dicier fight than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
Like, from that early going.
Yeah.
And yeah, a lot of it was just that, like, it seemed like Pereira was just fighting on level change threats and feints which weren't necessarily quite there, and thus just kept forcing himself to give range, and then just got just like backed up into the fence. Because in a weird mirror of his loss to Adesanya, he beat Prochaska in the stupidest place for him to be that, wasn't obviously being on his back or whatever. He beat him with his back to the cage, getting teed off on, and Prochaska, like Pereira before him, got too caught up in what he was doing and got chinned.
Mm-hmm.
It was such a weird parallel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
ideally he should never have been there in the first place, and I think he did a good job of calling out the fact that he was probably going to be more passive than he should be.
Yeah, it's just a thing in his MMA career, and that's kind of why I want to talk about the. This is a good opportunity. It's not like it's not a topic we've never covered before, but this looks like a great opportunity to talk about what effect the totality of risks that there are in MMA has on like a functional striking game. Because I think, I was actually pleased to hear Joe Rogan say this, because I feel that Pereira he obviously gets a ton of credit for his power. But people don't tend to give him, I think, the respect he's due as a technical kickboxer. He's not flawless, you know, but like, I don't know. I just think of like, which fight of his was it? In his glory days, he took on, Jason Wilness, or Vilnius. And Vilnius said, he's just a boxer. He's not a real kickboxer. Like, this was his lazy attempt at trash talk.
Mm-hmm.
And then Pineda succinctly knocks him down with a head kick followed by a jumping double knee. Real kickboxer shit. And I think that is, people are like, oh, this guy's got a huge left hook. He can swing and take anybody out. But he's, was genuinely a very skilled and pretty flexible kickboxer, and was like clearly getting better, even down to like the last days of his kickboxing career. Was improving as a technician, as a strategist, was more sort of survivable, and flexible in every fight. And now we get him in MMA, and I think it's easier to see him as just a big puncher because, like you said, like, he gets into a lot of dicey fights. His defense is much worse. More than anything, his defense is much, much worse in MMA. His striking defense, I mean, than it was in kickboxing. Mm-hmm. And, like, even here against Prochazka is not a fighter you should be, like, worried about his takedown game. But Pineda is, and he has to be, because, like, he did get taken down with just, like, a really stupid high crotch, that, like, he just doesn't have, like, the urgency. Like, he can sprawl. Like, you've said this. He's pretty good at stopping an initial takedown. He is. It helps that he's huge. But, like, he can sprawl. He can grab his overhook or whatever. He'll get his clinch position of some kind, and he can stop that. But he doesn't have, like, the urgency or the technical know-how when he's actually locked up and, like, entangled in a takedown attempt to continue to fight it off. And the takedown that
I think he's just not a natural grappler.
Yeah.
I think is one of the main, like we've said this about like Adesanya, right? Is that Adesanya is in some ways a natural grappler. He's got very sticky punches. He's very happy in the clinch. He naturally understands grips and so on. Ngannou as well is someone who is obviously in many ways a more natural grappler than a striker. I think there's lots of people like this, and it's interestingly enough, it's not always their skill base. It's not always what they came up with.
Yeah.
Like, I always felt like, Michael Bisping was in many ways a more gifted grappler than he was a striker, just because of his ability to fight off takedowns, get back to and more to the point, get back from compromising positions.
Yeah.
But like, he was trained as a kickboxer, so that was what he did.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think Pereira is definitely someone who they just don't like it. They're just not there for it. He's just a top-heavy dude with a giant head who is just naturally prone to not wanting to get put on the floor.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I feel like he's basically, what we've seen in his last few fights is he's pretty much developed the Derek Lewis approach to grappling. Mm-hmm. Which is like, I might be dangerous if I can get on top of you. Then I might get excited about grappling. Otherwise, I'm just going to wait it out and hope it doesn't happen again. Like, he did that against Blachowicz. He did it here. He basically tried, no escaped, until like the fence was right there and it was pretty easy and he could just power his way up. Very Derek Lewis. Otherwise, he just controlled wrists and stayed calm.
Yeah, and again, like, it's not a bad plan.
I agree.
He's it's incredibly dynamic. He's and huge, and he's
just like Derek Lewis.
He's not risking the fight getting finished.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just like Derek Lewis.
We've said many.
I was just gonna say, just like Derek Lewis, he does have the ability that, like, as long as he's still in the fight, he might win. So it's way more forgivable for a guy like Pineda to burn rounds losing the grappling than it is many other fighters because he has huge power. All right, sorry, you were saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we talked a lot about how, I think you can look at Pereira even from a, like, comparing his MMA fights to his kickboxing fights, and even though we've talked about how people get more pared down, like his low kicking game is simply better now than it used to be. Like, it's simply better than it was when he was a kickboxer. He has genuinely improved, like, multiple aspects of his technique since he's been a professional MMA fighter, which is cool to see.
Yeah,
but yes, it still hasn't. It hasn't come along with the level of defensive acumen which you might necessarily expect. Which I think was sort of your point that you were building towards, right? Is that despite all these improvements, he's still pretty vulnerable on the back foot. Because I think it's just because defense in MMA is just insanely difficult.
Yeah, it's just hard,
and
that's why MMA fighters default to distance above all. And Pereira too. I think that's why he has become. It's a lot less reliable that he will come into a fight and pressure somebody, even when it seems like the obvious approach, because he's like, I don't know what's going to happen when I'm close to them. I'm just going to be patient, and stay back and like be ready to step out of range. And again, I think he's even gotten better with that style, but it does allow opportunities for a guy like Prochazka, who should have never been able to get into this fight after the way it started, to just be like, well, what if I walk forward and throw things, and he'll land, because just sort of backing up against everything is not reliable against a guy like Prochazka. He'll keep running forward.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I think, this is obviously, like, as we said with Adesanya, it's a very dangerous thing to do. It's, in some ways, more dangerous than...
Yeah.
It's more dangerous than being, like, fully offensive in many ways. Because, as you said, like, this opens Pereira up to people that he obviously should be sort of obliterating, like Prochazka.
Yeah.
And at least part of it is being in MMA, but I think also it's a combination of being in MMA and also just getting older.
Sure.
Like, because that's just the natural way in which almost every single fighter goes. They just start to learn that they don't like getting hit that much, and they just can't hold on to the aggression that they had when they were younger.
True. He's 36, Is that a long career?
Mm-hmm.
Not that,
just two
not
different
that long,
sports.
To be fair. Not as long as you'd think.
Can you think of many super aggressive 36-year-olds who have had a career that long?
No. Yeah, he's just become. I think you're right. He's become veteran Pereira, and I think the MMA thing is a factor as well.
Yep.
There's just a lot more shit to worry about, but I mean, there still is a skill advantage you can count on. I mean, this is the thing that just makes it, I mean, not easy, but sort of easy to pick a fight like this. You're like, okay, maybe he's gonna get hit, but provided he can survive and not get one-shotted by anything, almost the more Yuri tries to hit him, and even to an extent, the more success he has, the more likely it is that the genuine skill advantage in boxing skill is going to come out. Which it did. I mean, everybody loves Yuri Prochazka. I'm one of them. He's great. He's exciting. He's just a very, like, to a comical degree, like, honorable fighter. He made a huge mistake in giving up the title because he was like, it would be shameful to sit on it. And then right after the fight, they're like, how'd you feel about the stoppage? And he was like, oh, I was out. He hit me really hard. Very noble,
He is an earnest man.
Yeah, he really is. It's hard not to like him. So this is not personal when I say, what the fuck was he doing when he got knocked out? Why would you do that? You've run the guy across the cage. You hit him. Now he is literally, like, back to the fence. His heel is touching the fence. This is the point at which you should not be falling into your shots.
Yes.
Right? This is when you keep your feet. Like, this is the thing, is that I think Prochazka is like a Sergey Kovalev. This is a fighter I've said this about many times before. While you are running away from him, his game really works. Because this sort of falling over himself is built in. And if he can sort of pretend that that's on purpose by falling into another strike, he's pretty natural. It looks like, all these like cool shifting shots and everything. But then you see him in a situation where definitely you do not want to fall into your opponent who you've just nailed with a huge clean shot. You want to hit them like 3 times from perfect distance. And he can't turn the falling over off. So it's not totally deliberate. It is situational. And it was just a terrible mistake. That, like, unfortunately was predictable, but just a terrible mistake that an elite fighter should never, ever be making. Like, the position that he is in when Pereira hits him, even with his chin, it's no wonder he gets stunned and dropped. Because he is head down, completely square, having thrown a right hand, and in missing it, just utterly lost his stance. There's no way he can absorb a shot from a guy like Pereira in that position. But there was no reason for him to be in that position. The guy was already cornered. You can't run after him anymore.
Yep.
So, I don't know. That's where the skill difference comes through. That at least Pereira,
I mean, this is the problem.
Yeah.
This is the problem with Yuri, is that he's just not very good. I mean, unfortunately.
He's contextually good. I mean, he's hyper aggressive. He has access to a kind of fearless, like, flow in his striking that a lot of other fighters can't. He is willing to take risks other fighters aren't. But yeah, you basically put
but
him...
he is mostly just raw talent.
Yeah.
And physical ability and raw talent in, all the areas that matter.
Yeah, yeah.
Whether it's physical toughness, endurance, speed, power, explosion, and whatever, coupled to a almost non-existent technical game, which has been built, as I said, like the games of Dominic Cruz or Tony Ferguson, but just without any of the actual foundational skill, which made those guys work.
Yeah, if he wants to continue to win at this level, he simply has to get better. Like, that's the end of it. If you put both these guys in one of those like sparring games where both fighters stick their front foot in a tire, so like you have to be in range, he would lose every single time. Which is why I picked against him. Once they're in a position where they're essentially both in the pocket, Pereira cannot back off anymore, who's going to win that? It's definitely going to be the guy who throws tight punches and keeps his feet when he does it.
Yep. What did you think of the stoppage? I didn't like it when I first saw it, but in retrospect, well, A, I'm always more of a fan of early stoppages than late ones for obvious reasons. And B, like, when I saw it a bit later, I was just like, okay, fair enough. He's pretty out.
I think it is a quick stoppage, but I'm more or less on the same page as you. I was like, oh yeah, fine, He got dropped, went for a takedown from his knees, basically got dropped again from his knees, and then had Alex Pereira on top of him. Like, I'm not sure it would have gone well even if he'd managed to get back to his feet. Now, maybe he could have made something crazy happen in the grappling and survived the round. It was quick, but I don't have a huge problem with it, and neither does Yuri Prochazka, so, he instantly accepted it. That's the kind of guy he is.
Yep. And yeah, I think we didn't miss out on anything apart from probably him getting coffin nailed to the mat and going stiff.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the most likely outcome.
Didn't really need to see it.
Yeah, most likely outcome from that position. Like I said, this is the other part of the Derek Lewisness in Pereira. If he's on top of you like that, he'll nail you. Like, he's not going to be so afraid of grappling that he won't recognize the obvious advantage of having mounted somebody who's mostly knocked out already. He probably would have crushed him with an elbow, and that would have been it. So, fine, Alex Pereira, just a very interesting, weird MMA career, The talent is undeniable, and yet you look at all these fights and you're like, how good are you? Like, how good is he? The takedown he gave up was not a great takedown. It was just like he went for guillotine. Stop that. That should not be in your arsenal, Alex. Because the only way you're ever going to finish that is by giving up a bad position. That shouldn't even be a thought for him. Underhooks. He should be the underhook man.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really, at the beginning of the episode, it's a really weird one because, again, he's now been a 2-weight champion in MMA, also a long-running champion in kickboxing. Like, this should have felt like an incredibly momentous win. Instead, it just felt like a win at light heavyweight.
Yeah.
It did not feel momentous at all. But, we'll see. I think hopefully he will fight Jamal Hill next. That should be fun.
They're all fun.
Again, it's a style matchup that is not going to expose the areas that he's bad at, but that's just modern light heavyweight for you. So, yeah. And it should be cool.
Yep. I also thought it was funny that he called out Adesanya.
Yeah, come to daddy.
True. Adesanya, come to daddy. Just a real all-time hater. Alex Pereira.
Yeah, for real, yeah.
You beat the dude.
Sometimes I thought people were like taking the piss when they talked about that stuff, but then he wins the belt and he's like, you've been saying you want time off, but I don't think you should.
He said something else. It was like through the translator, but it was quite funny. He was talking about he talked about how there was a man who really helped him when he was at his lowest. Who said, do you just want to be a guy in a bar the rest of your life? Because he had like a drinking problem and dragged him out of the bar. And he was like, and now I want to help somebody who's at their lowest point. He was really like stone faced, but being quite like snippy about Adesanya. And I just think it's so funny that like on paper, he clearly has the edge over Adesanya. He's beaten him a lot, but he gave up the one loss, and he's like, I know you were already much smaller than me at 185, but how about you come up in weight and fight me again, bitch? And Adesanya, guaranteed that will upset a guy like Israel Adesanya. He shouldn't 100%. Do it.
He's always been the more emotional one about this kind of stuff as well. So, yeah.
It would be really funny if Pereira just has such a haunting presence in Adesanya's life that he could somehow compel him to make the ludicrously dim-witted decision to go up to light heavyweight. When he's already not that big for a middleweight, he's very slender. And fight him again and lose a third time or whatever.
Yeah, you said that Pereira might be caught up in the in the one loss basically to Adesanya, but maybe he just really likes beating him.
No, I think that's it.
Maybe he just really enjoys it. It's just like this has always been my most fun that I've had. I'd like to beat Israel Adesanya again.
He just saw an opportunity to just sort of piss on him from a great height.
Yeah, maybe he just remembers that this is his most entertaining thing that he does.
It's like, oh, you got sort of dominated by that.
Israel Adesanya again.
You just got dominated by that guy that I knocked out in a minute flat. You should come fight me up here. I only weigh 245 pounds. My God. Will we see Alex Pereira at heavyweight before the end of his MMA career? It seems like we may, right? He's
almost certainly, yeah.
He'll
get
big.
Because he'll lose the belt at some point. He'll probably still be around for a while. He'll be able to make tons of money in MMA.
I hope so.
And there will almost certainly be like at some point they'll need a short notice fill-in or something, someone to fight someone at heavyweight, and he'll just be like, sure, I can do. I'll do that, and then he'll only be like 4 inches taller and 20 pounds heavier than his opponent.
And after that inevitable win, only one more fight away from a heavyweight title shot, probably.
Hell yes.
What a character, Alex Pereira. Got another belt. Very exciting, very strange. Just interesting to think about this man as an MMA fighter and see how thoroughly he is able to crush people at the tops of these divisions while still not being necessarily all that good at the sport. But that's enough for the now light heavyweight champion. Let's take a break. When we come back, a much, much quicker fight in the heavyweight division, Tom Aspinall versus Sergey Pavlovich. We also had Jessica Andrade versus Mackenzie Dern. Benoit Saint-Denis got a quick win over Matt Frevola. A fighter I have my eye on, a flyweight by the name of Steve Erceg, got another impressive win on the prelims. There's going to be a lot of stuff to touch on. We're going to see how much we can get to. All of that after this. Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it. Welcome back. Tom Aspinall, Sergey Pavlovich, the heavyweight title was sort of on the line. And, it was short.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely one of those Bisping doing his thing whilst Robert Whittaker fights or Romero kind of things, where you're like, all right, the belt's getting dropped by the old people after this.
Yeah.
And so this is, to all intents and purposes, just the real belt.
I mean, I guess, I don't know. John Jones isn't going to fight Tom Aspinall, is he?
Everyone knows, yeah. This is going to be a double retirement. Whoever, well, I will say, if Stipe wins, he is 100%. He is 100% going to retire. If John and if he loses as well. If John Jones loses, I don't think his ego could take it.
I think that's true. Are they doing Jones Stipe?
Nominally, yes.
When has it ever been the case that the real champion is defending their belt while there's an interim champion? Has that ever happened?
I can't remember whether I can't remember how like the whole GSP versus Bisping thing went out, because he obviously had two silly fights. One was against Hendo and one was against GSP. And I can't remember whether the interim belt was in between those two. But yes, it was obviously a silly thing. Right from the start.
Seems very weird, because like typically the interim champion is just the number one contender. And they're gonna get a fight against, they're gonna unify. It doesn't really make sense to have a champion defending his title while there's an interim belt. Like then the interim is over.
Yes, of course. So that's why this was insane right from the beginning. Because
such a joke.
Like from the minute they booked this fight, they were like, "It's for the interim belt," but you're like, "But they're having a fight between Jones and Stipe later on."
Yeah. Okay. Great. Everything makes a lot of sense. Anyway, Tom Aspinall, what is there even to say? This ended like heavyweight fights end.
It ended like Tom Aspinall heavyweight fights end. Which,
it had all
anyone who might have wanted, a little more clarity, just a little bit more on Tom Aspinall, you weren't getting it.
No. I mean, it had all the elements of a Tom Aspinall fight, including him getting absolutely beamed right at the start.
Mm-hmm.
Stepped in, bouncy, light in his feet, naked low kick, tried to lead with a left hook and just got cracked by Pavlovich throwing tighter shots down the middle. Of all people, Pavlovich throwing the tighter shots.
He does do that every now and again.
Yeah, he's got a jab.
He's got a good jab when he uses it.
Mm-hmm. And then he moved around some more, and then he just nailed Pavlovich. I don't really know what else to say about it.
Yeah, I mean, it was essentially all the dynamics, a bunch of dynamics that we mentioned, aside from the takedowns. But yeah, the main thing is that, like, he's just super fast. And Pavlovich just isn't. Like, both of these, I just picked round 1 KOs. I thought, because Yuri is so dreadful in the first round, typically. And to be honest, like, a lot of the time, so is Pavlovich. Like, he's just super hittable before he, even, he is another fighter, I think, who, in a lot of cases, sort of builds his counterpunching reads off getting punched in the face. And, yeah, he just couldn't afford to do that.
And Tom Aspinall is not bad in the first round.
No. So yeah, it was just a sort of classic matchup of a. I mean, it's almost farcical to describe Sergei Pavlovich as a slow starter.
Yeah, it really is. I was
simply does not leave the first round ever, but he certainly is compared to Tom Aspinall.
Yeah. Aspinall, seems to be keyed in really, really quickly. He doesn't seem to need much time to get his distance or his timing down. He's just really sharp from the jump, in the way that some fighters are, in the way that, like, Conor McGregor was, Yep. He's just locked in. Yeah. I mean, I guess kind of a cool finish, He led with a jab to the chest. I like to see that. Underutilized sort of idea. Threw a 1-2, in that Nate Diaz style. No separation between the shots. I mean, it augments the speed when your combination is so fluid. Using the jab just to get in, and before it even comes back, the right hand is sent out. But I don't have a lot to say. There's not a lot to do, because it's just like he tried some things, and then one of them really, really worked. Okay.
Yep.
Let's talk about
much it.
Yeah.
Also, something... yes, I believe Romero, the interim bout between Romero and Whittaker was in, I think, July of 2017, and GSP Bisping was November 2017. So
okay.
This is a almost perfect
wow.
analog to old people who are going to retire, sitting on the belt, and the other one is the real. And meanwhile, the actual contenders are fighting over what is in fact the real belt.
Yeah, and I'm just sort of letting the old people have it because they're going to be dead soon anyway.
Yeah,
exactly. They're not going to change now. Just we know what's really up. It's sort of a John Jones is in sort of a junior soprano position.
I don't watch this kind of...
You haven't seen The Sopranos, Phil?
We've discussed this many times.
What's wrong with you?
I only watch... It's going to be a bunch of talking. I only watch, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and She-Hulk and
WandaVision.
The Flash and the Arrowverse. No, WandaVision had too much talking in, man.
The Mandalorian.
Yeah.
Yeah, you love that shit.
One's great.
Mm-hmm.
Love it so much.
Well, I'm not going to explain it to you. People who watch The Sopranos, i.e. every other person listening to this sentence right now, they know what I mean. John Jones is junior. You're just going to let him have it. We know who the boss is. It's Tom Aspinall. Okay. Women's strawweight. Jessica Andrade, Mackenzie Dern. This one, Phil, big whiff. But I've rarely been happier to be wrong. I really enjoyed seeing Jessica Andrade get a win here. Have a great deal of sympathy for her situation. Heard some very disheartening things about her career and life in the last year or two, and then just to see her losing 3 in a row and looking, frankly, like she just didn't want to be doing it anymore is always a tough thing to see. When you see a fighter who just seems like they get in the cage and they appear to be in shape and everything, but they just look depressed, listless, no confidence. It's really tough it was like seeing like Chase Sherman, like in like the 6-fight losing streak that ended his UFC career. It's like, why? I wish you wouldn't be doing this, man. Like, this is hard to watch.
Yeah, and particularly when you're seeing someone whose main selling point was that they were just a completely unstoppable force of nature.
Yeah, exactly. They're just
like
ferocity.
You don't want to see them diminished like that. I don't want to see John Lineker, going around looking like he doesn't want to be there. In part because as we kind of said, people like John Lineker and like especially Jessica Andrade are not technically equipped to be passive fighters.
Yeah. Karolina Kowalkiewicz, another one. Not equipped to be listless and passive and they got to be going for it.
I mean, Israel Adesanya could cloak that shit for a long time.
Yeah, right.
Because he's tall and he's very good defensively and he's a sensationally good kickboxer and all this other kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But that served to sort of hide an obvious tendency towards being passive. But it's just a death sentence for fighters like Andrade. And it was good to see that it wasn't. So the curious thing for me is how much do you feel this one was Andrade looking better, and how much do you think it's Dern just being a surprisingly good style matchup?
I think it's largely the latter. I mean, I mostly say I think this could be a bounce back for Andrade just because I think she needed it.
That's kind of my take, is that I was watching this and I was like, I don't know that Andrade is looking any better.
Yeah.
She's still, waiting on shots. She's still, not pushing her game.
Yeah, I mean, to hear it from her, that was her strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Her game plan was basically you don't want to grapple with her, so just hang around and the opportunity will come up. Be patient. That was her approach. And I think stylistically, it turns out it was a perfect approach. It made a lot of sense because she was able to take Dern shots and the opposite was not true. But yeah, I think really the deciding factor here was that it was a kind of fight that Mackenzie Dern visibly hated.
Yeah.
I mean, part of it probably, as Dean Thomas very comically called out on the broadcast, she's no longer working with Jason Perillo. That's probably an issue. Then again, she was with Jason Perillo for quite a while without making any really noticeable strides. So, I don't know.
I mean, again, she was at least staying in her position and throwing punches
against Angela Hill.
Against Angela Hill, yeah.
Somewhat.
And she was throwing with power.
Somewhat. But I watching this, I was forced to wonder how much of that was simply the fact that she was pissed, These are two women, by the way, going through difficult divorces with abusive partners.
Mm-hmm.
She was pissed. She was motivated, and she felt confident because Angela Hill would touch her, and she's like, "Oh, it's nothing." And she would tie up with Angela Hill, and Hill's a good clinch technician, but she could still feel I'm strong compared to her. And neither of those things were true in this fight. So part of it, I think it did look like her technique deteriorated back to where it was. I think the other part was, I think she very quickly discovered she did not enjoy fighting such a physical opponent. That she looked a little more collected from the get-go. She's out there throwing jabs, 1-2s, and then pretty quickly into the fight, they tie up. She gets a head and arm throw, and Andrade just sort of pops up, and then she goes for a guillotine, and Andrade's like, no. She just tears her hands apart. And I think it got worse from there for Mackenzie Dern. Her technique just went to absolute shit because she just didn't enjoy fighting this muscle-bound monster of a fighter that is Jessica Andrade.
Yeah. But also, I think as soon as Andrade, I think the knockdown, the first one, was more psychological than anything else for both of those fighters. But I think for Andrade specifically, because
yes,
as soon as she knocked down Dern the second time,
yeah,
and or at least knocked her into the fence and just chased her, Dern immediately just spazzed the fuck out.
Yeah, oh my god.
And I think Andrade just, nothing gives you more confidence than, smelling blood.
Yeah. Yeah.
And knowing that your opponent is, essentially, not scared of you, but they are panicking under your offense.
And part of the reason I say the seeds of Dern's panic were planted earlier is that the first knockdown, I don't think is a knockdown.
Mm-hmm.
She actually just sort of barges towards Andrade, shifting, 1-2, just pumping out a bad imitation of classic Vitor Belfort punches. And she sees the counter left hook coming and sort of shies away from it. And just, it hits her on the shoulder, but I don't even think it's that knocks her over. I think she is just ready to fall down to get out of the way. She's
throwing herself out of the way of the punch.
Yeah. Flinging herself away. And then the second knockdown, I mean, it is almost comical. She tries what does she try? A takedown? And Andrade just stuffs it easily. I think she goes in for a single. No, it's a side kick or a teep, which sort of slides off target. And then, her back is turned as the kick gets caught. And she tries a spinning back fist, which is so hilarious. It's not thrown with any confidence. She basically turns around all the way before throwing it. Oh my God, where is she? Where is she? Where is she?
Mm-hmm.
And then she backs up to the fence. Andrade kind of gives her a feint and she just looks at the floor, Mackenzie Dern. She just completely takes her eyes. She can't bear to look at her. She flinches and just gets clubbered. As a result, she hated it. And absolutely, it was a blast of confidence for Andrade to see her opponent reacting to her that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's much to say other than that. I think, obviously, Andrade's low kicks, I think, were also a big part of forcing Dern to freak out. She couldn't. I mean, because, again, when the punch, if she could simply stand there and trade with Andrade, I think she was happier.
Mm-hmm.
But it was the fact that she didn't really have an answer to getting her lead leg kicked out. And that was what led her to have to try and sort of press forward, and she would try and draw Andrade forward and then, run forward after her. And these got increasingly desperate.
Yeah. What I loved is that this was a turning point for the commentary on Mackenzie Dern, which I found very funny. She's been bad in this particular way most of, almost her entire UFC career, in fact.
Oh, what? The way they were implying that, when Jason Perillo left,
yeah,
he extracted good striking out of her brain.
Yeah. Joe Rogan was suddenly, he's well, Jason Perillo is one of the best striking coaches in the world, no doubt about that. And he was you just can't do this at this level. At this level, this is just not good enough. And it's bro, her last fight was the only one in which she didn't look like this or worse. This wasn't even her worst striking performance. Not by a long, she barely spun around when she missed. She's been terrible on the feet most of the time, and I just thought it was funny that seeing a fight in which she still managed to hit Andrade a ton, sometimes with 4 clean shots in a row. She was nailing her, and they were they suddenly noticed that she's not a good kickboxer. No shit. We've been saying that. It's pretty evident. But yeah. I enjoyed seeing Jessica Andrade get a win. I think she needed it.
Yeah, she was, incredibly emotional afterwards. And she climbed the cage. And yeah, it's just really good to see. She's always been one of those people who will, she is the brave Brazilian of her divisions,
Yep.
plural. One of those people who will take every fight that's offered to them. Always fun to watch. And yeah, I didn't want to see her go out like this. Didn't want to see her be fed to, Mackenzie Dern on the upswing. None of us really thought this was a fight that needed making.
Mm-hmm.
Turns out, hopefully she's got some confidence back from it, and continues to have like a little mini resurgence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very glad for her. All right, let's take one more break then, and then we will just hit whatever other crap there was on this undercard after this.
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. And you can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
All right, welcome back to the show. I suppose we're going to talk very briefly about this upcoming main event. If such it can be called. The UFC's been all right lately, It's had some genuinely very good cards, and a lot of the ones that weren't like really good were decent.
Mm-hmm.
This one's bad. It's just not good. It has a very middleweight main event. I suppose it has a somewhat interesting prospect fight in the co-main, Michael Morales versus, as you've been calling him, Phil, Brother Matthews. Inshallah. And that's really, that's it that I care about. I barely care about that.
Yeah.
Uros Medic is here, I guess.
Yeah,
I care about that
it ain't
guy
a good one.
a little bit.
This is real two-tier stuff.
Yeah.
Because, we're really starting to see, I think, the differentiation between Apex cards and cards on the road.
We've been seeing it all year,
yeah.
I think, but yeah. Because then the following card in the schedule is another, which is like a 2-week delay. It doesn't come till December. That's another fight night, an ESPN card, and it looks good.
Yep.
Looks real good. And it's not at the Apex.
Yep.
So, Apex cards is where the trash. At what point are fighters going to start to feel insulted getting put on an Apex card? Do they notice?
Then they'll just say to him, we had Sean Strickland, man. We had this guy just main eventing and just showing up at the Apex every time because he lived down the road and he did a bunch of stuff for us. Then we gave him a title shot and he won.
Yeah,
do you want to be like Sean Strickland? Be on our terrible Apex cards, and you too can be a champion.
It could be you, yeah. And you could get a post fight. You could get a locker room bonus if you can correctly guess the number of jelly beans in this large jar. Another thing I expect fighters to be very good at. Anyway, Brendan Allen, Paul Craig is the main event that we're going to talk about. Mostly just to goof on, because what's our expectation here, Phil? I mean, I'm kind of
going to be a. I mean, the main thing about Paul Craig is you're just like, where are the takedowns? Like, this man has a grappling game. He can sort of strike, and
sort of.
But he's an enthusiast for going to the ground.
Yeah.
But whether he can get it there in any way is always a question. And this is one of those things where I was thinking about this in the abstract, and I was like, well, he fought Andre Muniz. He did, who is, you know, a good wrestler and grappler. He did take him down. Maybe, you know, with Paul Craig, maybe middleweight really is his division. He's a big grappler who struggled to get takedowns, who's moving down. Maybe he can physically overpower people more at this weight class, and he can be, you know, a contender. And then I looked at the fight, and I was like, oh, Andre Muniz just completely disintegrated and looked like dog shit, and the takedowns he gave up were stupid.
Yeah.
And it just leads me to think that we're in for another Paul Craig fight, which is going to be pretty much some variation of Verdum versus Overeem, where he tries to kickbox a bunch and then also pulls guard. And I just made Brendan Allen's probably just going to beat him up.
Andre Muniz turned out to be like truly in every way a blown up version of Charles Oliveira. Where like nobody's going to the ground with this guy. Why would you? He's so dangerous, you know. And even his wrestling is good. His takedowns are good, and he's just such a submission machine, and great positional control. And then like Paul Craig is like, you know, just ducks his head and barrels forward. You know, just trying a takedown. Not even really.
He's immediately falls over and then essentially explodes underneath him.
He just falls over and starts crying. Like he absolutely loathed having Paul Craig on top of him, and he could not stop Paul Craig from taking him down. That's middleweight for you, folks. Somebody, even the most impressive, and then somebody's like, "What if I try this thing nobody's done before?" And they just can't deal with it. So yeah, it's hard to separate the fact that Paul Craig got what, like prior to that, even after Muniz's loss to Brendan Allen, prior to that fight, the idea of Paul Craig getting a win over Muniz would have seemed like a huge victory. And like surely Paul Craig has gotten much, much better. Or middleweight is just the division for his skill set to blossom. It's just hard to square that with how bad Muniz looked in the fight and not attribute a large part of the blame to the result to Muniz, like basically sort of being exposed.
Again, I looked back at it and I was like, oh yeah, that's be what
Paul Craig,
reinvigorated middleweight Paul Craig looks like, and I was just like, oh, he looks like Paul Craig.
Yeah, he looks a shredded Paul Craig. You got to give him that. You know,
yeah, I mean, you can't front on the guy's will to win and his drive. But then you can say the same thing from Brendan Allen. He's just a super tough dude. In some ways, these guys are mirrors of each other. Just think that Brendan Allen tends to be better at it. You know, they're both just extremely gritty, you know, have never quite figured out how to make their grappling work by taking people down kind of fighters. So simply become invested more in their kickboxing over time. But I think Allen is just the more coherent fighter. He's a better striker. He throws more. And I think he's probably a better wrestler as well. It's just the fact that he's probably going to be giving up a reasonable amount of size, which is the only complicating factor.
That's the only concern. But yeah, I mean, one thing about Brendan Allen that maybe makes this fight more interesting is that, and this came through in his fight with Muniz, he will grapple with everybody. Brendan Allen is not a fighter who necessarily, because my first feeling looking at this was, well, Brendan Allen can probably just like not give up takedowns and win. But just being a sharper and higher output striker, and one who knows that, like, for example, pressuring and throwing combinations is a good way to win fights. He's going to have Henry Hooft like yelling and scowling in the corner and making him do that, and he's going to do it by God. But it does occur to me that like this is both it could be a weakness, but it's actually usually a strength. That like Brendan Allen sort of enjoyed the same kind of paradigm shift against Muniz because he was willing to grapple with him. And Muniz has basically been grappling people who are terrified of grappling with him up to this point, or very, very old. In the case of, he fought Jacare, right?
Yep.
Just very, very old. And Brendan Allen was like, yeah, whatever. We'll go to the ground, and I'll just sort of like win scrambles and get better positions, and I'm going to threaten my own submissions, and so that maybe makes the fight more interesting. It would be cool to see these two grapple. But I would still assume that given an opponent who isn't as laughably easy to take down as Muniz, that Craig is just not going to get to the same amount of good positions as Allen, even being bigger. He's not a good wrestler. You know, his takedowns are pretty terrible, actually.
Yep.
It's just that apparently Muniz's takedown defense is even more terrible. So anyway, yeah, I'm going to take Brendan Allen to win a mostly kickboxing match.
Yeah, I also do find myself thinking that like Paul Craig is going to get out pretty badly.
Yeah.
I think he is a big man, and I'm not sure, I'm just not sure whether he can keep it up for 5 rounds.
Mm-hmm.
Again, he's not someone who I would ever disrespect the amount of time that he puts into his training and how much he invests in this sport. He's clearly a bit of a nutter.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I just think he was starting to look tired in that Muniz fight, and it was only the fact that Muniz was absolutely disintegrating that didn't make Paul Craig look worse.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I think that's quite likely. I mean, they've been pretty crazy fights, but we've seen him gas in fights even up at light heavyweight. You know, that stupid.
The Oezdemir fight.
Yeah, that's exactly the one I was gonna. You heard me say stupid, and you knew exactly which fight I was talking about. Anything that extends, any fight that extends beyond like a round and a half, we've seen Paul Craig look pretty ragged. So, never a problem for Brendan Allen. Okay. Well, anything else to say about our UFC 295 undercard before we close out?
You were a fan of Erceg?
I like Steve Erceg. Yeah, I just think he's a pretty quality, like, long-range boxer. Really like the way he uses his jab, like the way he cuts off the cage. Excellent use of feints, good combination puncher. I just think he's, was, like, well-tested, because there were moments where Costa was just all over him, and I appreciated he's a very patient and poised fighter. That he was able to just sort of weather a storm when he had to, get back to center of the cage when Costa was all over him, and then, get back on his stick and start pressuring Costa again. I just think he looks like a really sharp, rangy kind of boxer type.
I think Jan Borjas from earlier, like, down the bottom of the card. Obviously great to see
Borjas. Yeah.
But great to see like a consistent body punching attack.
Mm-hmm.
It's cool to see them like signing quality flyweights who, as we've mentioned many times, now simply look like bantamweights. That's just what we're seeing nowadays.
Pretty much, yep.
They both look and fight like bantamweights, because this was the power punching boxer was essentially the what you would get from people at bantamweight. It was just what that division was made of.
Yep. We're going to have to open an atomweight division at some point, or a strawweight rather.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have.
Yeah, I'm really pleased to see lots of like fun fighters going through for flyweight, because it will make, hopefully, the cards which they get buried on much more watchable. Well, given the fact that they were on 295, maybe that's also brighter things for the future of the division.
Yeah, I don't know. Who knows? I mean, I wouldn't.
It wasn't the world's most stacked pay-per-view.
No, it wasn't. They kind of had to just sort of fill out the bottom half, and I will say, like, you say that like, hey, maybe we're going to get more good flyweights. But we have noticed another trend this year, which is that, like, bantamweight is still the most exciting division. But the number of bantamweight fights they have managed to put together, which are completely uninteresting.
Yeah, remarkable.
It's really, truly remarkable. So they will find a way to like, oh, this card's forgettable. That means there's going to be like flyweight fights on it. And it'll be like, who the fuck is this? Not this flyweight. I don't want this. They'll find a way, Phil.
Yep. You ain't wrong.
All right, well, that will have to be it for this week's episode of Heavy Hands. I thank you all so much for joining us and enduring our mutual jack-off session as we get a rare win and just savor every last drop of juice from that event. The metaphor is spinning out of control.
Wow, yeah, those are some pretty nasty metaphors to mix right there. Ugh. It's a grim one to end on, Connor.
A mutual jack-off in which we've savored every last drop. Anyway, find us on social media. We don't post stuff like that, not normally. Phil at Evil Greg Jackson on Twitter. I'm at Boxing Bush. Find me at King Typo on Blue Sky, and check out our Patreon, yada yada. We love you. And if you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.